Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Je m'appelle Florian Liégeois et je suis chercheur à l'Institut de recherche pour le développement et représentant de cet institut au Zimbabwe. Je suis virologue au sein de l'unité de recherche NIVEGEC. Cette unité de recherche mène des travaux sur les maladies infectieuses et les vecteurs qui les transmettent. L'Institut de recherche pour le développement est une institution française publique de recherche qui défend un modèle original de partenariat scientifique équitable avec les pays du Sud et une science interdisciplinaire et citoyenne engagée pour la réalisation des objectifs du développement durable. La mission première de l'IRD est de produire de la science focalisée sur la zone intertropicale et méditerranéenne et fondée sur un partenariat scientifique équitable avec les communautés d'enseignement supérieur et de recherche des pays et régions concernés. Cette mission correspond à un double objectif. D'une part, contribuer aux avancées de la connaissance scientifique en matière de développement durable, et d'autre part, aider à mieux fonder les politiques de développement sur la science. L'Institut de recherche pour le développement a construit ses priorités scientifiques pour satisfaire aux 17 objectifs du développement durable, définis dans l'agenda 2030 des Nations Unies. 5 départements scientifiques composent l'IRD. Le département éco-bio, écologie, biodiversité et fonctionnement des écosystèmes continentaux, dont les travaux portent essentiellement sur le rôle des milieux et des organismes vivants et de leur interaction dans le fonctionnement des écosystèmes continentaux et des services qu'ils rendent aux sociétés, dans l'adaptation des écosystèmes continentaux aux changements globaux, dans la préservation de la biodiversité, dans leur résilience face aux changements globaux et démographiques, et dans les relations entre les systèmes continentaux et la machinerie climatique. Le département océan, qui s'intéresse, comme son nom l'indique, aux océans, mais aussi au changement climatique et aux ressources halieutiques. L'enjeu de ces recherches est de comprendre en quoi les changements physiques et écologiques de l'océan impactent particulièrement les populations de la zone intertropicale. Le département DISCO, pour dynamique interne et de surface des continents, et qui mène des recherches sur le fonctionnement du système Terre à travers ses dynamiques physiques et biogéochimiques soumises aux changements globaux, qu'ils soient climatiques, économiques ou encore démographiques. Le département Société, ou SOC, qui cherche à mieux comprendre les sociétés contemporaines de l'espace tropical et méditerranéen. Les recherches menées aborde les enjeux de société de façon interdisciplinaire en privilégiant l'analyse des dynamiques, des mutations, des adaptations et des résistances qui traversent et animent ces sociétés. Et pour finir, le département santé et société, auquel j'appartiens, et dont les travaux associent deux aspects complémentaires de la recherche. L'amélioration des connaissances et la réalisation de projets de recherche d'une part, et l'intervention ou la recherche opérationnelle ayant un impact direct pour les populations et soutenant les programmes de lutte d'autre part. L'IRD, c'est aussi 75 unités de recherche, 77 laboratoires internationaux, 2050 agents, dont 850 chercheurs, et plus de 1500 publications par an, dont 60% en copublication avec nos partenaires du Sud. Plus de 300 chercheurs de l'Institut de recherche pour le développement sont déployés dans 38 pays de la zone intertropicale et méditerranéenne, en Amérique centrale et latine, sur le continent africain et en Asie du Sud-Est. L'Institut de recherche pour le développement a également mis en place différents outils de partenariat afin de développer les recherches multidisciplinaires et renforcer les capacités de nos partenaires. Ces outils se déclinent en 3 principaux axes. Le premier correspond à l'attribution de bourses individuelles pour des étudiants doctorants, des post-doctorants ou encore pour favoriser les mobilités des chercheurs dans les laboratoires en Europe. Le second axe est le financement de jeunes équipes associées à l'IRD ou le financement de laboratoires mixtes internationaux. Ces projets sont coportés par des chercheurs des pays partenaires et par des chercheurs de l'IRD et ils visent à favoriser et à accompagner l'émergence d'une nouvelle génération de scientifiques. Et pour finir, le troisième axe qui finance des réseaux de recherche internationaux, des écoles d'été ou encore des observatoires. L'Institut de recherche pour le développement est présent au Zimbabwe depuis peu de temps. Je suis à ce jour le seul chercheur de mon institut, mais dès le mois de septembre, nous renforcerons notre présence au Zimbabwe avec l'arrivée d'une nouvelle chercheure. Les projets que nous menons s'articulent autour de la problématique des maladies émergentes. Nos projets s'attachent aussi à renforcer les compétences techniques et académiques des acteurs de la recherche au Zimbabwe et également à développer des infrastructures pourvues des technologies de pointe permettant l'analyse des échantillons au Zimbabwe. Il faut souligner que ces projets ne sont possibles et réalisables qu'avec des partenariats forts et solidement établis. Et je tiens à rendre hommage ici à mes collègues du CIRAD qui sont présents au Zimbabwe depuis plus de 2 décennies et qui ont su établir des partenariats basés sur la confiance et l'équité dont je bénéficie aujourd'hui avec l'Université du Zimbabwe, en particulier la faculté des sciences vétérinaires et la faculté de médecine, mais aussi avec le département des services vétérinaires. Mesdames et messieurs,
In the CASCOM project, we have 3 main sub-objectives. In this one is the capacity building through technical training and academic training with the supervision of students.
There were quite a number of areas that needed to be addressed in the animal health domain, specifically looking at the disease that has been affecting animals of late in Zimbabwe, which is called January disease, and the scientific name theileriosis.
During the course of the year, we had infection spreading through these deep tanks that are on the southern part of the district.
We have been facing challenges in deaths of animals due to this disease. There were gaps in terms of capacity of technical personnel to detect or to diagnose disease from the field, and also there were gaps in terms of new knowledge in how to detect diseases early and respond also rapidly.
The work that we are doing on the evaluation of the surveillance system under the CASCOM project is to identify the gap in the surveillance system to be able to propose a recommendation to improve it. The second objective is to upgrade the laboratory. We did the inauguration of a biomolecular laboratory at the veterinary faculty at the University of Zimbabwe.
CASCOM contributed to the training of dozens of Zimbabwean staff involved in the control of animal and zoonotic diseases and to the establishment of the molecular biology laboratory with international standards that we had the pleasure to inaugurate today.
We are very grateful to the CASCOM people. They have helped us quite a lot. The lab was just, it has very few equipment. Now it's fully equipped and we are grateful.
When the CASCOM came, the lab was upgraded. So we now have an international standards lab.
This biomolecular platform will be a tool to improve the global surveillance system in the country. The third objective is to improve the effectiveness and the autonomy of the surveillance system in Zimbabwe.
What we do is semi-invasive sampling, which is where we capture the bats, but we don't kill them. So we use traps. So with these traps, usually we set them up at night. That's when we sample the bats. So we collect the samples that we want. So normally it's just fecal samples, hair samples, blood, and then afterwards we actually release the bats to go.
I've been able to train her in field sampling and mainly also in biosecurity. because it's really important, given that we are working on potentially pathogenic viruses. It is really important to train our students to honor the biosecurity measures in order to prevent accidental transmission during our work.
It's really important to have an efficient surveillance system because a functional surveillance system should demonstrate the absence of a disease or should determine the presence or the distribution of a disease and should rapidly respond to an epizootic event.
Welcome to Francophone Scientific Research. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Gori. I am a researcher and lecturer in the Department of Veterinary Biosciences at the University of Zimbabwe. I work on infectious diseases. I work with collaborators from CIRAD on a project to improve capacities of Zimbabwe in control of animal and zoonotic diseases. My presentation is on emerging infectious diseases. I'm going to talk about emerging infectious diseases, and I'll give particular emphasis to coronaviruses. Here is the outline of my presentation. First, I will give a brief overview of infectious diseases. Then I will define what we mean by emerging infectious diseases, which are the main focus of this presentation. Next, I will talk about the factors responsible for emerging infectious diseases. Then lastly, I will talk about the public response to infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are health disorders that are caused by organisms such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, or parasites. It is important to note that there are several harmless organisms in our body, but under environmental challenges, some organisms may cause disease in humans. Infectious diseases can be passed from person to person and some from insects or other animals to humans. There has been significant progress in the control and management of infectious diseases. Most infectious disease receded in Western countries. So this is due to improved urban sanitation, improved housing, vaccination, as well as use of antibiotics in the case of infections. Several antibiotics have been used, and this has reduced illnesses and death from infectious diseases. According to recent trends, a number of deadly infectious diseases such as poliomyelitis, leprosy, measles have gone down. So we notice that well-established infections such as cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis, among others, they had gone down in incidences, but now we see them rising again. So the cause for this is worrying, and this has caught the attention of the scientific community, which is working to seek answers. Apart from that, new infectious diseases are coming up, and these are referred to as emerging infectious diseases. Emerging infectious disease is defined as newly identified and previously unknown infectious agents that cause public health problems either locally or internationally. On the other hand, we also have re-emerging infectious disease, which are defined as infectious agents that have been known for some time, had fallen to such low levels that they are no longer considered public health problems, and are now showing upward trends in incidence or prevalence worldwide. Infectious diseases keep emerging and re-emerging. Thus, humans are constantly facing this challenge in unexpected time and place. So it is therefore important to continue with efforts to control well-established infectious diseases, as well as being vigilant and learn and understand the behavior of emerging and re-emerging diseases. So each epidemic provides an opportunity to learn and devise ways to mitigate the effects of disease, as well as any further emergencies. So generally, factors responsible for emergence of infectious diseases have to be found to be based on the human host, the climate and environmental changes, as well as the pathogen itself and transmission of infectious agents from animals to humans. Of the factors related to human activities, international and domestic travel has been shown to be a critical factor for emerging disease spread between countries. For instance, in 2003, SARS-associated coronavirus emerged in Vietnam and was spread to different countries through this mechanism. Now history is repeating itself with the emergence of COVID-19, which emerged at Wuhan city and rapidly spread. Another human factor that contributes to emergence of diseases is urbanization and population mobility. According to United Nations, the global urbanization rate is expected to exceed 60% in 2030. And 1 in 3 urban dwellers lives in a slum. So we find that urban areas tend to have crowded places, such as in the markets, bus stations, touristic areas, beaches, among others. And these are the best means for spreading emerging diseases. For example, COVID-19 pandemic, which is transmitted through respiratory route, has got global attention and pandemic spread through mass gathering events. Mass gatherings present a great challenge to public health and is challenging to control citizens' day-to-day life. For example, various gatherings of persons from different locations, followed by their return to home communities, played a notable role in the early spread of COVID-19. We see these gatherings in religious beliefs and activities, social events such as sporting activities. Thus, after events and gatherings, people will return to their homes with COVID-19, which will be transmitted to the rest of the family members. So during mass congregation, transmission of the disease is high. Social distancing in the gatherings is difficult to maintain. Another challenge is that tracing of suspected cases and their contacts is also a challenge. This leads to rapid spread of the disease. Another human factor that leads to emergence of infectious diseases is migration and war. War and other humanitarian crises result in migration and displacement. So when people move to occupy other places, this presents big opportunity for emergence and spreading of infectious diseases. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees estimates that about 37,000 people a day are forced to flee their homes because of conflict and persecution. For example, in Syria, millions were displaced due to civil war, and this has presented the door for emergence of epidemic of infectious diseases, and the diseases spread through vulnerable populations in Syria as well as neighboring countries. Climate and environmental changes also contribute to emergence of disease. And in most cases, the ecological and environmental factors that contribute to emergence of infectious diseases are linked with increasing global population. This leads to a demand in land, hence putting pressure on the ecology. Humans exploit nature, causing deforestation when they clear land for resettlement, use trees for building, firewood, and other activities. Then deforestation will force animals into closer contact with humans, and this increases the possibility for infectious agents to breach species barriers between animal and humans. In some cases, changes in climatic conditions or natural disasters may cause emergence of disease. For instance, in 1990, emergence of hantavirus pulmonary disease was triggered by El Nino natural disasters. Also, generally, global warming is associated with the spread of malaria, leishmaniasis, and other diseases. Still on human factors, we find that interaction between human and animals increases chances of emergence of disease. The majority of all human infectious diseases and pandemics have come from, apart from agricultural activities, humans also come in close contact with wildlife through various activities. Thus, wildlife trade, both at global or local level, is one of the best means for transmission and outbreak of diseases. Illegal trade of bushmeat is also paramount for transmission of disease from animals to humans. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, which emerged in 2003 in Vietnam, and its outbreak was most likely linked to animal markets. Now history is repeating itself with COVID-19 at Wuhan City in China. It is important to note that pathogens can spill over from animals to humans. Pathogens themselves may be prone to emergence of disease, and this happens when they undergo changes. From the current trends, we notice that rapidly mutating viruses are more common among the emerging pathogens. Take, for instance, viruses whose genetic material is DNA are more stable than those with RNA as genetic material. Therefore, upon any harsh environmental conditions such as antiviral stresses, host immune response, and treatment with drugs, RNA viruses can mutate rapidly. So in human evolution, viruses are serious infectious agents causing a number of life-threatening diseases. Therefore, most of the deadly epidemic and pandemic diseases in humans have been caused by viral pathogens. On this slide, I have some examples of emerging diseases that have been experienced recently. So we have Middle East respiratory syndrome, which was transmitted from camel to human. We also have SARS-CoV, which is transmitted from bats. Also Zika virus transmitted from mosquito, rabies from dogs, and others here. So of interest is the bat. The bat is a reservoir of several viruses. So for instance, viruses that originate in bats may be the most notorious emerging zoonoses that spill over from wildlife into domestic animals and humans. Thus, the bats are a reservoir for several emerging viruses, including coronaviruses that cause serious disease in humans and agricultural animals. So there are numerous viruses that threaten human life, and coronaviruses are currently trending globally. Coronaviruses were first identified in the early 1960s, and they were linked to human, cattle, pig, and chicken diseases. Several coronaviruses infect different hosts, such as cattle, known as bovine coronaviruses. In dogs, there are canine coronaviruses. In cats, feline coronaviruses, porcine coronaviruses, etc. In humans, there are around 6 known coronaviruses, and the current ones are the SARS and MERS-CoV. In 2003, severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreak occurred and was caused by newly emerged coronavirus SARS-CoV. Again, in 2012, Middle East respiratory disease, which is very dangerous, emerged, and it was caused by novel coronavirus. Then the current novel human coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19 disease, is also a global health problem currently. On this diagram, have an illustration of the transmission of coronaviruses. So here we have SARS-CoV of 2003 have been originated from bats, then transmitted to cats, and finally to humans through contact. Then we also have MERS-CoV, which was transmitted from camel to humans. Then the current SARS-CoV-2, it is still not known how it was transmitted from humans, but there is speculation that SARS-CoV-2 was transmitted either through the pangolin or the snake or an unknown animal, which is yet to be identified. So this all shows how human interaction with animals cause transmission of new pathogens into humans. With regards to public health response, what we have learned from the recent epidemics caused by coronaviruses is that an infection in one country is a threat to all. The outbreaks showed us the important role played by air travel in international spread of emerging infectious diseases. Thus, infection control is not an issue of a single country, rather it is an issue of global community. Hence, controlling the spread of emerging and re-emerging diseases requires international effort and collaboration. Furthermore, multiple expertise is required. Public health specialists, epidemiologists, lab expertise, as well as information management expertise is required. I'll conclude my presentation by saying, although there is progress in the management of infectious diseases, the emergence of novel pandemic infections remains an enduring problem in human health. As has been revealed by COVID-19, the global health system is not sufficient enough to handle pandemics. So immediate intervention requires that the source of pandemic be known. So human, environmental, and pathogen-related factors are risk factors involved in the emergence of disease. But now we still don't know the source of COVID-19 pandemic. Even though there are some speculations, the scientific community is still searching the exact source of COVID-19. Thank you.
Le Sénégal aussi, par rapport aux autres pays africains, a un défi à lancer par rapport à l'objectif des OMD, mais aujourd'hui également l'objectif des ODD, c'était de réduire au maximum la mortalité infanto-juvénile, mais également la mortalité maternelle.
Dans le contexte africain, de façon générale, les femmes, pour aller à l'hôpital, ont souvent besoin de l'autorisation du mari. Si le mari n'est pas là, ils ont besoin de l'autorisation de la belle-mère ou de la sœur du mari, qu'on appelle le Badian.
Badian, c'est la sœur, Gor, c'est le quartier. C'est un concept de notre culture sénégalaise qui sont quand même des leaders reconnus, qui sont des leaders avérés pour le développement de leur quartier.
Il y avait un programme qui a été donc décidé par le gouvernement du Sénégal. Nous avons mis en place un projet de renforcement de ce programme. Donc, consistait à étudier comment on peut renforcer le rôle des Badian de Gor.
Pour essayer de voir comment améliorer la santé maternelle et infantile. Le projet Badianougor, c'est dans 4 régions du Sénégal et aujourd'hui, donc dans chaque région, on a mis des groupes de femmes qu'on suit pour pouvoir réussir avec cette mission.
On a d'abord commencé à essayer de structurer ce qu'on appelle l'association des Badianougor. On les a formés pour que ces derniers soient capables en fait de jouer le rôle social, mais aussi de jouer le rôle de promotrice de la santé en aidant à améliorer la santé de la mère et de l'enfant.
Le travail ne se limite pas entre le poste de santé ou bien le district de santé et la population. Même au niveau de la communauté aujourd'hui, les femmes ou bien certaines personnes qui ont des problèmes au niveau de leur famille, au niveau du couple, font appel à ces marraines de quartier, à ces Badianougor, pour régler ces problèmes-là.
On a besoin aussi de savoir qu'est-ce qui la motive, quelles sont ses motivations, pourquoi en fait quelqu'un a décidé de s'impliquer de façon bénévole dans la société.
Ces femmes-là qu'on considère comme des leaders, si on les capitalise, si on les forme, elles pourront, en synergie avec les autres acteurs, que ce soit institutionnels, universitaires, améliorer la santé de la mère et de l'enfant.
Notre rôle présentement est de proposer un modèle de rémunération qui serait adapté au contexte du Sénégal. La deuxième partie de cette recherche, c'est d'essayer de documenter comment tout cela a été donc mis en place et quels sont les résultats que nous avons.
Les Badianougor ont réussi à faire 10 000 visites à domicile, faire de telle sorte que les femmes en grossesse puissent aller suivre normalement leur grossesse, ce qui posait problème avant. Faire en sorte que les enfants, bébés, etc. puissent être vaccinés, ce qui posait problème avant. Faire de telle sorte que aujourd'hui, la maman qui veut planifier ses naissances puisse la faire en prenant elle-même ses décisions.
Les premiers résultats montrent que le fait que les Badianougor aussi ont été structurés autour d'organisations a permis à ce que ces derniers soient reconnus socialement. Ils ont reçu des badges, donc ils sont reconnus socialement par leur communauté, mais aussi ils sont reconnus socialement donc par l'État du Sénégal. Nos résultats montrent que ça fonctionne et c'est extrêmement important parce que lorsque la personne qui est censée jouer le rôle donc, de médiateur entre la communauté et le système de santé est une personne qui est issue de la communauté ou est une personne qui parle la même langue que les personnes vulnérables, c'est un facteur extrêmement important de facilitation de l'accessibilité du système de santé.
De plus en plus, il y a des femmes qui adhèrent, que les maris ont compris, que les personnes réticentes commencent à s'engager et que cet engagement, si j'avais un mot à dire, c'est l'engagement de part et d'autre. L'engagement de la population, mais également l'engagement de ces Badianougor.
Bonjour à tous les amis de la francophonie. My name is Emma Achten. I'm the regional representative for Belgian Red Cross in South Africa.
And my name is Joost Sommer. I'm the regional first aid project manager.
We're both based in South Africa and we're following up from here on the projects that we do with the Zimbabwe Red Cross as well. We do various projects with Zimbabwe Red Cross, mainly focusing on first aid.
Yeah. We offer technical support for Zimbabwe Red Cross Society to roll out their first aid trainings in the most qualitative way possible. And we have developed various training materials in a contextualized and evidence-based manner, such as basic first aid, youth first aid, and first aid for first responders.
Please enjoy the video that you see just now that Zimbabwe Red Cross made to inform the public on the first aid services that they have. Thank you.
Thank you.
First aid saves lives. It's a very important and necessary life-saving skill in the home, workplace, or community at large. Even as the world battles with COVID-19, first aid remains an integral life-saving skill, particularly given the respiratory-related challenges it comes with. Spread facts, not fear. Get quality and affordable first aid training at your nearest Red Cross Center. This message has been brought to you by the Zimbabwe Red Cross Society in partnership with the Belgian Flanders AP project. Zimbabwe Red Cross Society, saving lives, alleviating human suffering.
We really hope you enjoyed the video. As you can see, Zimbabwe Red Cross has a lot of first aid trainings to offer.
So please get in touch with the Zimbabwe Red Cross if you want to do a training, either for yourself, your domestic staff, your family and friends, or maybe for your businesses. Surely get in touch with them and they'll make it all work.
Greetings from South Africa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.